Hey YouTube. Hey Kevin, welcome to the stream. How's the audio? Hey Laura, welcome to the stream. Audio test, audio test. Awesome. How's everybody on this fine hurricane-y weekend? Good, Kevin, thanks. Hey Daryl. Hey Racefish Room, welcome to the stream. Once again, I have no real axe to grind today. I'm finding topics to talk about for an hour are kind of difficult. It's a lot easier for me if you guys pop me questions and get me started thinking about stuff. Then sometimes it's easier for me to fill the hour. What's going on with you guys in your fish keeping? Maybe that could be our topic today. My Peru fish seem to be doing fine. I haven't lost any more Nigrosincus black belt imperial tetras. They seem to be getting fat and sassy. They still, the imperials still seem to stay on the dark side of the tank. I've got one light on that tank, and it's over one end, and it's just a floodlight, and they seem to still stay in the dark end of the tank. I guess preferring that to being in the light. When I feed them flake food, they do slowly come out and end up all in the lighter side of the tank where the food is. The plecos seem to be doing fine. I haven't fed them any more cucumber yet because cucumber's really rough on water quality. It really drags down the water quality really fast. Any kind of live plant material that you put in the tank, fruit, vegetables, what have you, really does start to break down water quality really quickly. So I will feed them some more. I'm going to try green beans to the suggestion of many others. But once again, green beans are another thing that will wipe out your water quality. You have to do a water change almost immediately after feeding green beans. The buhurcaina seem to be doing well. I've been studying a lot of footage on YouTube about the species that I think they are, and I've noticed a lot of the older videos, the burhuquina, are much yellower than my cichlids are. I'm not sure if I've identified them correctly, although from most pictures they match most closely to that identification that I made. I can't say the Latin name, Lamas or something. Hey Max, you want to say hi to YouTube? Say hi to YouTube, Max. I'm still working on that identification. It's tricky. There are like 7 buhurcaina from that area alone, and there are only pictures of 3 or 4 of them that I've been able to find. And so it's very possible that it's one of the ones that I've never been able to come up with a picture of to match identification wise. And it's also possible that it's one that I do see a picture of. It's just the pictures or the video of them, they're just not in the same coloration. All large cichlids and cichlids even in the Acara family can exhibit a huge array of coloration depending on the habitat they're in, depending on the amount of light that is around them, depending on where they stand in the pecking order of the fish in the area. They can exhibit a crazy, wild, differing colorations, and including up to their health too. If they're not feeling well, they'll exhibit a coloration that's completely different. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what the coloration of a species is because you just never know. But about half of the pictures of the cichlids that I have seen on YouTube and in various cichlid forums match the designation that I have decided they are, and about half of them don't. A lot of them show a lot more yellow coloration than my cichlids exhibit, but the river that they come from in Bolivia is named Caliente, hot, and the temperature range in that river is in the mid to lower 80s. So it's very possible that the same fish put in a much warmer water situation would exhibit more yellow coloration. So I can't really tell exactly what exactly I've got still. I think I've narrowed it down, but I'm still very unsure. And that's basically how it goes when you get undescribed or really rare species. Hey Joel, welcome to the stream. It's just really difficult sometimes without having an ichthyologist go through the fin and ray counts and even DNA tests to figure out exactly what a fish is sometimes. And that's one of the reasons, and when you go to the pet store, the live fish store in your local area, and you look at the fish that are in the tanks, and then look at the name that they have ascribed to that fish, which may have come from the seller that sold, the wholesaler that sold them the fish, told them this was the name. It really bears watching closely because you just never really know. Sometimes fish will be misnamed because the name that they've misnamed it to is a lot more expensive fish than the fish that they actually are, and so they're trying to do it for money. Sometimes you will find contaminants in a tank or group. Hey Dank Tanks, welcome to the stream, man. Sometimes you will find contaminants in a tank. Now, in my experience, this occurred a lot more way back in the day, you know, in the 70s and the 80s than it does now, because the shipments that were coming out of the wild were pretty much just a catch-all, and anything that looked like one thing, they just put it all together and sold it as one thing. And sometimes you could catch contaminants among juveniles that weren't what the name on the tank was at all. I've done this several times. Hey Angelo's Fish, welcome to the stream. I'm glad you stopped by. So it's actually naming what your fish is, other than what the store sold it to you as, or the shipper sold it to you as, can oftentimes be very difficult when you're dealing with wild caught fish or fish that come in from shippers in other countries. Oftentimes it's really difficult to nail down exactly what these fish are. So I'm slowly working my way through my studies. At some point, when I get a picture that I feel like is really valid enough to use, and I still am having trouble getting decent pictures of these guys because they won't stand still for me, and because I don't have a lot of light in the tank they're in, and because when I do add light, I've got lights, and when I do add light, they just run and hide or try to jump out of the tank. So I'm still working on getting a picture that I think is worthy enough to send to Sven Kullander, who, by the way, was the one that erected this clade, the Boo Her Kaina, and it is based on a name that the Peruvian people use to call these fish. It's like a catch-all. And while these are in the general area of Acara, they are not true Acara. They are mouth-brooding Acara is what they call them, because these fish will lay their eggs on a small object, a leaf, a small rock, a stick that's wide enough for them to lay a plaque of eggs on, and they will move that plaque around to keep it in safe areas. And then when the fry begin to hatch, they will pick the eggs off of the object and swish them around in their mouth until the egg casing comes off, and then they will hold both the father and the mother will both hold them in their mouths and mouth brood them and raise them up until they're big enough to spit out and survive on their own.
Minor accident.
So I'm working on trying to nail down the identification. I feel like the one that I used is very close, but I'm not positive yet, and I'm still continuing to work towards actually identifying them correctly as either an undescribed species, which some people feel like they are, or as a species that has been described elsewhere.
Careful. Anna, come back here.
So how is everybody's day going? How is everybody's fish keeping going? Anybody have some home fish room news they want to produce, or questions that they'd like to ask? I'm once again bereft of topics, and I'm dependent on the kindness of strangers. If you want to talk about something that's going on in your fish room or ask questions, I'd be more than willing to give it my best shot. I know most of you that are here are very solid fish keepers that have been at it for a long time, most of you. And I understand if you don't have very many questions. Let's see. Mostly what I've been doing this last week with my fish is trying my best to keep their water quality up, and trying my best to figure out how it will be possible for me to get a solid photograph that is completely clear. I use my my macro lens because it allows me to get in so close, but there's a very fine edge of focus on a macro lens. And so if the fish is at an angle to the camera lens, if the fish is not straight flat to the camera lens, you get a less than quality focus on some of the other parts of the fish. And to get a good identification photograph, you need a clear shot of all of the fins spread wide and the basic coloration of the fish, the eyes, the head. And most times when you're doing a fish picture, people tell you to focus on the eye. And that's really good, a really good way to do it. But if you're trying to do an identification photograph, then you really need perfectly clear of the entire fish. And I've got to catch this fish standing still in the light that I have in the tank, and I only have a small light in this tank, just a short bar. And it's not even a regular LED. It's one of those submersibles, and I've got it on the green-yellow setting because the white setting doesn't seem quite as bright as the green-yellow setting does. And so I'm having difficulty. They'll stand my flash. If my flash goes off, they kind of freeze. But if I put my LED bar on top of my camera and turn it on, they will scatter. They want no part of that super bright light. So somehow I'm going to have to come to a happy compromise about the photography and getting an excellent shot of the fish itself in full coloration so that I can send that to people to help me identify the fish. All right. On the Go Wild Peru front, my last communication with Michael Barber was that he is still trying to get an accounting from the shipper. I've not had any communication with Dean lately, so I don't know if there's been some advancement on that front or not. So I've heard nothing back from Go Wild Peru lately about where we stand with the shipment being such a disaster. I trust Michael to do what's right. I know that even if it comes up that Michael cannot afford to replace that shipment or to ameliorate our losses with another shipment, that in my mind he's doing what he has to do for his business, and that I trust him to do what's right, and that I will be okay regardless of how that comes out. All right. I've done very little videoing or talking about my other fish, or I and my wife's fish. The RU2s in the 20 seem to be doing just fine. There are still a couple of rainbows in that tank that I couldn't catch the last time we tried to catch rainbows out of that tank. The larger rainbows, Goiter Rivers.
One of the, well, the alpha male is showing some mating behavior.
In the 75, honey?
No, up the RE2.
Oh yeah. She says one of the RU2 males is really starting to flash a lot of mating colors. The 75, we're still fighting some issues Hey, Thirsty Rabbit, welcome to the stream, and I'm glad you've made a live stream. Um, you're perfectly welcome to watch the replays, though, but if you want to ask questions or if you've got comments that you want to give, then making it to a live stream gives you a good shot at that. You can always ask in the comment section after a stream, but you get more real-time response in the live stream itself. If you have any questions, please ask them. That'll give me something to ramble on about here. My wife's 75-gallon, the rainbows, the praycocks, and the goiter rivers, and we still have a bronze Australian that I got from Jimmy, and one of the goiter rivers that I got from Jimmy is still left, but we're still fighting internal parasites with them. I just every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks we feed them fenbendazole flake for 3 or 4 days to try to keep knocking it out, because rainbows seem to have a hard time getting rid of things like parasites. Once they get them, they're difficult to get rid of, and several people have suggested to me to feed them the flake food that's got the medication in it, and it seems to be holding off all of the bad outcomes, but they still seem to be carrying the parasites anyway. So we're continuously doing that. All of the praycocks seem to be doing fine. These are ones we got from Lucas Brett's when we went to visit Lucas's fish room, which I highly recommend to anyone. The Tiger Endler rainbows, Tiger Rainbow Endlers that come from Lucas Brett's line that I got from Jimmy when Jimmy moved out west, are just overrunning their 13-gallon rimless tank. I'm going to have to start selling them or something, but they are looking great. The shrimp, we had a Kevin says he's just raising fry. Watching plecos grow is worse than watching paint dry. Hey, down the wormhole, welcome to the stream. Yeah, plecos take a great deal of patience, and as far as watching paint dry, I did that for 20-something years as a living, so I'm going to say I enjoy watching plecos grow more than watching paint dry. I got a lot of experience watching paint dry. But yeah, plecos, depending on the type of pleco it is, or the type of loricard that it is, or the type of ancestris that it is, and the 3 that I've got in my 55 that were wild caught in Peru are ancestris. They just have no identification name. I don't even think there's an identification number yet for them. So they are ancestris, which is a loricard and also a pleco. So yeah, watching them grow, it's pretty exciting for me for that 55 to watch those ancestris grow, because they are really active, and they seem to be pretty much indifferent to what goes on outside of the tank. So I get to watch them a lot. If I make a sudden movement, they'll jump sometimes, but most of the time even lighting doesn't bother them. They don't really seem to mind. And so I can take lots of pictures as close as I want. I can get the camera right up on the side of the tank, and they don't seem to mind a single bit. They don't recognize it as a predator, but the Buherkaina seem to recognize that camera, that black camera body, as a potential predator. Now my L260 Lorcards, Queen Arabesques that are in my 110-gallon tank, and I haven't talked too much about my 110 lately. I bought 5 Teleociclas. Hey 54 Punchy, welcome to the stream. I bought 5 Teleociclas from Eric Bodrock at All Oddball Aquatics about a year ago now, and I am down to 2. The dominant male has pretty much offed everything except himself and the female that he chose. And even in a 110-gallon tank with a wall of rockwork, there just wasn't enough hiding places to keep that male Teleocicla from killing the other 3 males and the other female. So Ray's Fish Room says, Dwayne, I know you have bred Jack Dempsey's. What percentage of fry will be electric blue if breeding 2 electric blue Dempsey's? Do you think you would get half? I've got to admit that I've never bred regular Jack Dempsey's against electric blue Dempsey's, but I have read quite a great deal about that process. And I think if you're breeding 2 electric blue Dempsey's, that your likelihood is about 25% normal Dempsey's and 75% blue, electric blue Dempsey's. I think that is what the percentages work out to be. And it's probably a general, you know, it could be much less, it could be slightly more, but I think that that would be your outcome. And like I said, I've never tried that breeding cross, but I am aware that a lot of times you're better off breeding an electric blue back to a regular Jack to get the health benefits out of the line of the regular Jack Dempsey, because electric blues are such a product of inbreeding that their health is not the greatest in the world, and so you're often better off breeding back crossing into the regular line to get a more healthy progeny, and you will get less electric blues that way, but the ones that you get will be more healthy and have more normal Jack Dempsey genes in them. Jack Dempseys are one of my favorite fish. Short of a flower horn and maybe an occasional doveye that does want to interact with you, and most of them don't. But occasionally you'll get a doveye or maybe even a jaguar that has a real high personality. But Jack Dempseys in general have very high personalities. They're very thoughtful about the things that they do, in the sense of they can figure out how to do stuff when other fish can't. They interact very heavily with their owner, the person that feeds them. They will interact with your household pets as being enemies and deserving of attack. And there are a lot of things that Jack Dempseys do before the whole breeding situation comes up that endear them to me a great deal and endeared them to me a great deal. And I would always recommend someone that's new to fish keeping try a Jack Dempsey. You know, you've got to have a larger tank. If you end up with a pair, they can get by in a 55, but they would probably be better off with a larger tank. And if you're trying to keep them in a community situation, you better either just have one or a very large tank so that the other fish can all get over on the other side of the tank when breeding starts, because they will jam every other fish in the tank right up against the far side of the tank when they're in breeding behavior. Yeah, Joel, they are awesome. They are an awesome fish. And watching their parenting behaviors is just the best. Of all the fish that I've ever watched do parenting behavior, I have enjoyed Jack Dempsey's parenting behavior more than any others. They are as doting a pair of parents as any I've ever seen. They continuously dig pits, and supposedly the pits are dug to move the fry from one pit to another, and some people suggest that that is to prevent them from getting some sort of bacteria, that they don't stay in the same pit for very long. It may be because of microorganisms that the parent uncovers while digging the pit, and then puts the babies in that pit so that they can eat those microorganisms, and when they're gone, moves them to another pit. But they are incredible parents. Now, once those Dempseys get 3/4 of an inch, they're not incredible parents anymore. They'll eat them just as soon as, once they get done with their brood parenting behavior, those fish are just as much at risk as any other fish in the tank is. So if you are breeding Dempseys for sale back to a live fish store for profit, I would recommend that you, and for me it was always easiest to move the parents out of the tank. I'd put the parents in a 55, let them breed, let them raise the fry to about 3/4 of an inch, and then I would pull the parents out and put them in separate tanks and feed them both back into shape again, because parenting is a pretty tough pull on a fish, especially the females, and it's oftentimes better to fatten the female up, give her a chance to rest before you try to breed them again. But I will tell you this, that a pair of Dempseys that are split are no longer a pair. And when you put them back in the same tank together, they will fight it out again to make sure that they are compatible breeding pair. So it's possible to lose a pair by splitting them up and feeding them. So sometimes it makes more sense to pull the fry, but it's pretty difficult to get a whole slew of fry out of a 55-gallon with any kind of substrate and decorations of any sort, rock work. It's pretty hard to net those guys out of a tank. I never did it back then because nobody had ever brought it up before, but it might be possible to use a snail trap situation to get those babies to go in that trap and then not come out again. And that might be one way to get a bunch of babies out of a tank with parents in it. But my inclination is to believe that if you put one of those bottle traps in a tank, that as soon as the lights went out, the pair of Dempseys would destroy that bottle just trying to figure out what it was, or how they could get to the food inside of it, or because they didn't like that they couldn't get to the fry that are inside of it or something. Dempseys are devilishly good at destroying things. They die a lot by smashing heaters that are on in a tank and electrocuting themselves. You really have to cover up a heater in a Dempsey tank, or put guards on it. You know, you're almost better off to have the heater in a sump than the heater in the tank itself with Dempseys, because they are extremely destructive. All right, guys, we're rambling on here about nothing in particular. Once again, if you guys have got questions, I'd give it my best shot as far as answering them go. I was talking about my L260s. I have seen no breeding behaviors out of my L260s in the last 6 months or so. I may have made a mistake by putting the teleocyclas in the tank. The teleocyclas are natural predators in areas where the L260s live, and I may have created a situation where they're not interested in trying to breed, but I was hoping to spur the males in the tank into defending a cave against those teleocyclas, and then maybe I could get some breeding out of them, because as Kevin said, waiting for stuff to happen with loricards or plecos it's a very long-winded process, and my understanding is that most L260s don't live much over 4 years, and I've had them in the tank a good 2.5 years now. Thank you. Thank you for the good words, Dee. I actually need to be doing some water changing myself right now, but I decided I'd wait until after the live stream was over. Yeah, I think most fish do like tannins. I mean, it's going to drop the pH and drop the hardness of your water when you add tannins. So you've got to watch it with some fish. I wouldn't advise it with African cichlids, you know, Rift Lake African cichlids. But most other fish, I mean, all of these fish that we caught in Peru, there were very few plants in the water. As you can see from these pictures, there were lots of plants on the side of the rivers or the streams, and it was very few actual plants that we found in the water. You can look at all these pictures and see that the plants are either growing up out of the water or they're on the sides of the banks. But inside the streams were a ton of wood that had fallen in and tons of leaf litter. So I think that tannins are one of the things that most fish deal with as plant material falls in the tank and begins to break down. So I think tannins are a very natural thing for fish. Now, fish that have been raised in fish farms and in our tanks are probably not used to tannins that much, but there seems to be more and more information coming out about the benefits of the tannins. You know, almond leaves are touted for their antibacterial properties and for the benefits to the fish that are around them. So I think more and more information is coming out as to how these leaves breaking down in the water actually help the fish combat bacteria and parasites. So yeah, I think adding tannins for most fish, any South Americans in general, Central Americans, and most fish from most other places that aren't in really liquid rock water, you know, pH above 8 and TDS above 500 or 600. Driftwood and leaf litter or leaves are a good way to drop the TDS and the pH of a tank. You know, instead of using buffer up or buffer down, you're going to get a lot smoother transition over a longer period of time by putting a piece of driftwood in a tank, or by putting any of the various leaves that are useful in tanks. I use magnolia leaves because I've got a magnolia right outside my front door and I know that it has not been sprayed with anything. So there are a lot of different kinds. There are a lot of different kinds of leaves out there that you can use, but I would be careful about it, and I would do my due diligence on research to make sure that the leaves that you're getting are, one, compatible to the fish that you have, you know, in the sense of them needing extra hard water, not softer water, and two, that the leaves themselves are not dangerous to your fish. There are a lot of kinds of leaves, like if you put belladonna leaves in a tank, you'd probably kill your fish. So there are a lot of kinds of leaves that are not useful in this application. Some people use coconut shells. Some people use. Dean brought back a bunch of Brazil nut shells. There are a lot of different kinds of tannin producing materials. All of the seed pods. Yeah. Dee says that she's got an acorn tree growing, and that's where she gets a lot of her tannin leaves from, and that's a good one too. Maples generally are not harmful to your aquatic denizens, but there are some leaves out there that will be harmful, and you need to, instead of just going out and picking up a bunch of leaves and throwing them in your tank, you do kind of need to study the subject. If you just type into a search engine the name of the leaf and is it safe for aquariums, you're pretty generally going to find somebody's article somewhere about them having used that leaf. But more often than not, the leaves will be safe. A lot of people use those alder cones for their shrimp tanks. That's another thing that will add alder leaves and alder cones. And very often you can use the cones or the flowering parts of plants that are safe for use in a tank. Also, like occasionally I'll put the part of the magnolia branch that has the where the leaves come out of. I'll put that in with the leaves themselves. All right, guys, we're rounding up towards the hour, and once again, I've talked almost an hour on nothing, and I'm sure sooner or later people are going to get sick of hearing me ramble on about nothing. So if you have any last minute questions to add, if you've got some information that you've gleaned from your own fish room, nope, cheers. Yes, Joel, you're always good for no questions. Joel, you're probably a better fish keeper than I am, so that doesn't surprise me too much. I guess I'm not attracting the young fish keepers that don't know anything about the hobby and need to. You're here for the rambling. Well, that's basically what you get when you deal with me. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this one up a little early. I've got some water changes to go do myself. Thanks for spending some of your Saturday afternoon with me. I hope things go well with your fish and your fish keeping. And good luck.